Welcome to Heartline Stories. Today's story follows Rachel, a strong single mother, who faces a big decision when her ex-husband suddenly returns into her life. But when her current partner, John, is caught in the middle, everything becomes more complicated. Will Rachel give her ex a second chance, or will she choose a different path? Stay tuned to find out how this unexpected reunion changes everything. Let us know where you're watching from. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more stories like this one. John Bennett was a successful billionaire who had everything: money, a huge mansion, luxury cars, and even a private jet. But there was one thing he didn't have: the woman he once loved. Years ago, John had been in a passionate relationship with a woman named Rachel. They were happy until life took them in different directions. They broke up, and John moved on, though he always thought about Rachel from time to time. One day, John decided to visit a small diner in town. He had been hearing good things about it from his friends. The diner was cozy and simple, a stark contrast to his fancy lifestyle. He walked in and was greeted by a waitress with a warm smile. As she took his order, something about her face seemed familiar, but he couldn't quite place it. John sat down and waited for his food. His eyes kept drifting to the waitress, and suddenly a memory from the past flashed in his mind. It was Rachel. His heart skipped a beat. Could it be the same woman? After all these years, here she was, working as a waitress in this small diner. John couldn't believe his eyes. He had to know for sure. When Rachel returned to check on him, he looked up and smiled. "Rachel?" he asked, his voice shaking slightly. Rachel froze for a moment, clearly surprised by the question. She looked at him closely, trying to recognize him. Her eyes widened in shock as she realized who he was. "John," she whispered, her voice filled with disbelief. "Is it really you?" John stood up, his heart racing. "I can't believe it. After all these years, I find you here, working as a waitress in this little diner." Rachel nodded, a soft smile forming on her lips. "I never thought I'd see you again." They both stood there for a moment, just looking at each other. It was like time had stopped. John couldn't believe the coincidence. He had spent so many years thinking about her, wondering what had happened to her, and now here she was, standing right in front of him. Rachel seemed to hesitate for a moment before speaking again. "I never thought I'd see you either, especially not like this," she said quietly. "I guess life took us down different paths." John nodded. He couldn't help but feel guilty. "I never meant to lose you," he said, "but I was so focused on my career, I never realized what I had until it was gone." Rachel's expression softened. "I understand, John. I never blamed you. We both had our reasons for moving on." But even though she said that, there was a hint of sadness in her eyes. John noticed it and knew that he needed to make things right. He smiled warmly at her. "I never stopped thinking about you, Rachel, and now that I've found you, I don't want to let you go again." Rachel's heart skipped a beat. Was it possible? Could they rekindle what they once had? But there was a bigger question. Why was Rachel working at a diner? What had happened to her? John was about to find out something that would change everything. John could see that there was more to Rachel's story. Her eyes told him there was something she wasn't saying. He wanted to ask, but he didn't want to overwhelm her. Instead, he sat back down, hoping she would open up when she was ready. Rachel paused, looking around the diner. It was a simple place, with checkered floors and wooden tables. The smell of freshly cooked food filled the air. She seemed to be lost in thought, as if the past was coming back to her in waves. After a few moments, she spoke again, but this time her voice was quieter. "You're probably wondering why I'm here," she said, her voice shaky. "Life didn't exactly go as planned." John nodded, his heart heavy with concern. He couldn't imagine what she had gone through. "You don't have to tell me if you don't want to," he replied softly. "But if you do, I'm here." Rachel hesitated for a long moment, looking down at her hands. Then with a sigh, she spoke. "I had dreams, John. I had big dreams just like you," she started. "But things didn't work out the way I thought they would. I got married, had a family, but things fell apart." She paused, clearly uncomfortable. "My marriage ended badly. I ended up alone with a child to raise. And with everything falling apart, I couldn't keep up with all the bills. So I had to make a choice. John's eyes widened. He could hardly believe it. Rachel, the woman who had once been so full of life, had gone through so much. So I came back here, she continued, her voice breaking. I grew up in this town. This diner was always a place where I could get some peace, so I started working here. It's not glamorous, but it helps pay the bills and take care of my son. John's heart sank as he listened. The woman he once loved had been through so much pain, and he hadn't been there to help her. He thought about the comfort of his own life, the luxury, the endless money, and now it felt meaningless compared to what Rachel had been through. Rachel wiped a tear from her eye and smiled weakly at John. I never expected to see you again, especially not like this. I don't know what I was expecting, but I didn't think you'd come back into my life like this. John reached out and placed a gentle hand on her arm. Rachel, I'm so sorry for everything. I had no idea what you were going through, and I should have been there. She smiled faintly, shaking her head. You didn't know, John. It's not your fault. The weight of the moment hung in the air. John couldn't help but feel that there was more to Rachel's story, more he still didn't understand. And somehow he knew that whatever happened next would change everything for both of them. But the question still lingered in his mind. Could they rebuild the life they once had? Or had the years apart changed them too much? The diner was quiet now, save for the clinking of dishes and the faint hum of the kitchen. John knew he needed to do something. But what? John stared at Rachel, his thoughts racing. The years had passed, but the connection between them still felt so strong. He thought about everything she had been through, the struggles, the heartache, and he realized just how much she had changed, yet remained the same in some ways. She was still the kind, caring woman he had fallen for. I want to help, John finally said, his voice soft but determined. I want to help you get back on your feet. If there's anything I can do, I'll do it. Rachel's eyes widened in surprise. You don't need to do that, John. I'm fine. I've managed so far and I don't need handouts. John shook his head. This isn't a handout. I just want to make things right. If I could go back and fix everything, I would. But I can't. But what I can do is help you now. You don't have to keep struggling on your own. Rachel was silent for a moment, her hands still gripping the edge of the table. It was clear she was torn. She had always been independent, never wanting to rely on anyone. But there was something in John's eyes that made her feel like it was okay to let her guard down. For the first time in a long time, she felt like someone actually cared. I don't know, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I've been doing this on my own for so long. It feels strange to think about accepting help. John reached out and gently took her hand. You don't have to accept it all at once. We can take it slow. I just want to make sure you and your son are okay. You deserve to be happy, Rachel. Her eyes filled with tears again, but this time they were different. Tears of relief, of hope. She hadn't expected to see John again, and certainly not like this. She hadn't expected to feel this cared for, this seen, after everything she had been through. The door to the diner opened, and a customer walked in, snapping Rachel out of her thoughts. She quickly wiped her eyes, trying to compose herself. She smiled faintly at John, but this time it wasn't as forced as before. Thank you, John, she said softly. I'll think about it. John smiled back at her, his heart heavy but hopeful. Take all the time you need, Rachel. I'm not going anywhere. For the first time in a long while, Rachel felt like maybe things could get better. The life she had built for herself, despite all the struggles, was not the end. Maybe there was more ahead for her, and maybe, just maybe, she and John could find a way to move forward, together. As John left the diner that night, he couldn't help but think that he had made the right decision to come back. He didn't know what the future held, but one thing was certain. He wasn't going to let Rachel go again. The next few days were a whirlwind for Rachel. Every time she thought about John's offer, she felt a mix of emotions. She had always been proud of how she had managed on her own, even if it hadn't been easy. But John's words echoed in her mind. He wasn't offering a handout, but a chance to start over, to heal from the wounds of the past. Meanwhile, John couldn't stop thinking about Rachel. Every time he passed by the diner, he found himself hoping he would see her. He missed the way they used to laugh together, the way she had supported him when he needed it most. A week passed before Rachel finally decided to take the first step. She found herself standing outside the diner after her shift, looking at the street where so many memories lingered. She had made up her mind. Maybe, just maybe, it was time to let someone in again. John had been waiting for this moment. As soon as he saw her walking towards him, his heart skipped a beat. He had been patient, but seeing her now, with a glimmer of hope in her eyes, made everything worth it. "Rachel," he said, his voice full of warmth, "I was hoping I'd see you." Rachel smiled softly. "I've been thinking a lot about what you said. I've decided I want to give this a chance. For me and for my son." John's face lit up with relief. "You don't have to make any big decisions right now. Let's just take it one day at a time." They stood there for a moment, taking in the simplicity of the moment. Two people reconnecting, uncertain of what the future held but willing to try. Rachel glanced over at him, her heart pounding. "I don't know how this will work out, but I'm ready to trust you again." John nodded. "We'll figure it out. Together." As they walked side by side down the street, neither of them knew what the future would bring. But for the first time in years, they both felt like maybe, just maybe, their lost love could be found again. The days following that moment felt like a new beginning. Rachel and John started meeting regularly, first for casual coffee dates and later for longer walks in the park. It was strange, almost like starting over, but both of them realized that they were learning to rediscover each other. Rachel was still cautious. She wanted to believe that this time could be different, but the fear of being hurt again loomed in the back of her mind. She had spent so many years keeping her heart guarded, especially after everything that had happened in the past. John, however, was patient. He was determined to show her that he wasn't the man he had been when they first parted ways. His wealth and success didn't matter to him anymore. What mattered most was earning back her trust little by little. He knew it wasn't going to be easy, but he was willing to prove that he cared for her in the way she deserved. One afternoon as they walked through the park, John looked over at Rachel. She seemed more relaxed than she had before, smiling and laughing at the small things. They had shared a few stories about their past, but there was still so much left unsaid. "I want you to know," John said, his voice sincere, "I don't just want a second chance at love. I want a second chance at being the man you deserve." Rachel stopped walking, taking a deep breath. She had heard those words before, but somehow this time they felt different. "I'm not sure what the future holds for us, John," Rachel admitted, "but I think I'm ready to see where this goes." John smiled, his heart swelling with hope. "That's all I ask." As the weeks went on, Rachel found herself opening up more. She shared her hopes and dreams with John, the fears she had about her son's future, and the challenges she had faced as a single mother. John listened without judgment, and his encouragement slowly helped her feel stronger. One evening after a dinner out, John took Rachel's hand as they walked back to her car. The sky above was dark, and the stars sparkled like tiny diamonds. "Rachel," John said, stopping her in her tracks, "I've never meant anything more than this. I want to be here for you. For everything." Rachel looked up at him, her heart racing. "I want that too, John. I want us to build something new, something we both deserve." But just as they were about to kiss, Rachel's phone rang. She looked down and saw the name of her ex-husband on the screen. Her heart sank, knowing this call could bring back old wounds. Rachel hesitated, her thumb hovering over the screen. She didn't want to answer, not when everything felt so perfect with John. But she knew she had to. With a deep breath, she accepted the call, holding the phone to her ear. "Rachel, we need to talk." Her ex-husband's voice came through, heavy with urgency. Her heart thudded in her chest. She glanced up at John, who was watching her with a patient, supportive gaze. "About what?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. "It's about Ben," he said, using their son's name. "There's something we need to discuss." Rachel's stomach dropped. She knew that something wasn't right. "I'll be right there," she said, before hanging up the phone. John reached out to gently touch her arm. "Do you want me to come with you?" She shook her head. "No, this is something I have to do on my own, but thank you." John nodded, though there was concern in his eyes. "I'll be waiting here, whenever you're ready to talk." Rachel gave him a small smile, appreciating his understanding. She quickly left the parking lot, her thoughts swirling. What could Ben's father want now? The last thing she wanted was more trouble with him, especially now that she was starting to rebuild her life. The drive to her ex-husband's house felt much longer than it actually was. Her mind was filled with 100 possibilities, none of them good. When she arrived, she was greeted by the sight of her ex standing on the porch. He looked serious, like he had something important to say. "Rachel," he said as she approached, "I'm glad you came." She nodded, keeping her emotions in check. "What's going on?" He motioned for her to come inside, so she followed him. Once inside, her ex took a seat on the couch and patted the spot next to him, a silent invitation for her to sit. "I've been thinking a lot," he began, his voice low. "I've realized I haven't been a good father to Ben. I haven't been the kind of man you or he needed. And I know that's on me." Rachel sat down, trying to process his words. "What are you trying to say?" "I've decided to make things right. I want to spend more time with Ben, and I want to fix things between us. I don't want to be a distant father anymore," he explained. "I want to be there for him, for both of you." Rachel's heart sank. She wasn't sure if she believed him or if this was just another attempt at manipulation. "You've said this before," she said cautiously, "but nothing ever changes." Her ex sighed. "I know, but this time, I mean it. I'm asking for your trust. I don't expect you to just hand it to me. I know I have to prove it, but I want to try." Rachel was silent for a long moment. Could she trust him again? Could she really believe that he would keep his word this time? She thought about Ben and the life he deserved, one with two parents who could be there for him, no matter their differences. "I'm willing to see what changes," she said finally. "But this can't just be about you. It has to be about Ben too. He's the one who needs consistency." Her ex nodded. "I understand, and I'll show you that I can be the father he needs." Rachel stood up, feeling a mix of relief and uncertainty. "I'll need to think this through, but thank you for telling me." As she walked back to her car, Rachel's mind raced. She didn't know if she was ready to open up to him again, but the idea of Ben having a better relationship with his father felt like a step in the right direction. When she got back to her apartment, John was waiting for her, just like he said he would be. He stood up as soon as she entered, his concern still evident. "Is everything okay?" he asked softly. Rachel nodded, but there was a weight in her chest. "We'll see. He wants to be a better father, but I'm not sure if I can believe it." John walked over and pulled her into a gentle embrace. "Take your time. You don't have to make any decisions right away." "I know, but it feels like everything is changing so fast. And I'm scared of making the wrong choice," she confessed, feeling the burden of the decision settling heavily on her. John placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "Whatever happens, I'm here for you, Rachel. You don't have to do this alone." Rachel gave him a small smile, grateful for his support. "Thank you." She felt torn, but one thing was clear. Her life was starting to change, and she had to make the choices that would lead to the best future for her son. The future felt uncertain, but for the first time in a long while, she didn't feel like she had to face it alone. As the days passed, Rachel continued to reflect on the conversation with her ex-husband. She didn't want to put Ben through another round of disappointment, but she also wanted him to have a chance to build a meaningful relationship with his father. John, as always, was by her side, offering his unwavering support. His calm, patient presence made everything feel a little less overwhelming. He never pushed her to make decisions before she was ready. He simply reminded her that she wasn't alone. After much thought, Rachel made a choice. She decided to give her ex-husband the chance to prove himself. But this time, she would set clear boundaries to protect Ben's well-being. The next time her ex reached out, Rachel agreed to a meeting. They discussed co-parenting, setting new expectations and routines for Ben's visits. Rachel was firm, but she also offered him the opportunity to rebuild trust, slowly. As for John, he respected Rachel's decision, and though he still worried about her, he knew she was doing what felt right for her family. In the end, Rachel knew that no matter how hard things were, she had the strength to make it through. She had her son's best interests at heart, and with John's support, she felt ready to face whatever came next. Rachel and John continued to grow closer, sharing their hopes and dreams for the future. They both knew that life wasn't perfect, but they had something precious, a love that could withstand even the toughest of challenges. And as for Ben, he began to see the benefits of his father's presence in his life. It was slow progress, but Rachel could see the small changes in their relationship. Things weren't perfect, but they were better. And for Rachel, that was enough. Thank you for joining us on this Heartline story. Will Rachel make the right choice? Sometimes the past can shape the future in unexpected ways. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.